Welcome to ByProduct Live, where we unbox everything SaaS and product. We talk with experts and leaders in SaaS and product to understand their approach to leadership and ways of working, to share their knowledge and understanding. ByProduct Live is brought to you in partnership with AmSource. AmSource are a specialist talent solutions business to startup and scaling tech businesses globally. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Lilly Dobreva to discuss a topic that's not discussed nearly enough, ethics in product and product management. Lilly is a CPO at LittenTree. LittenTree build privacy-preserving Web3 identity aggregation protocols. She's based in Munich, and Lilly has also worked in product leadership roles across connected cars, lifestyle and communities, and e-commerce. Lilly also recently built an app on ChatGPT designed to help people quit smoking. So if you're finding it difficult to kick that particular habit, you should check it out on her LinkedIn profile. Hello and welcome to the show, Lilly. How are you today?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. So ethics feels like a super important subject, but I think something that product teams and product development companies don't really pay enough attention to or are aware of the importance and the impact that it can make. So what would you say is the current situation in kind of product development, and what's the current status quo?
Yeah, I think you're right. Not a lot of people actually talk about ethics and product management. In general, it's not a hot topic on conferences. I don't see a lot of blog posts being written about it. And overall, it just feels like it's a non-topic indeed. There are certain cases where somebody complains, especially officially, and then, of course, the legal team gets involved just to make sure the risks are mitigated and so on. But apart from those one-off, ethics does seem to be not really a topic. And it feels like in a lot of companies, no one really owns it. There are a lot of innovations taking place, a lot of stakeholders involved, and each one of them has their own responsibility. But when it comes to ethics, I feel like nobody truly is assigned to own it. And that does make it a little bit unfortunate because it is a very important aspect of product development, for example. It does seem that also companies aren't really paying a lot of attention because, for example, if you think about a product metric or a metric that would tell you how ethical a product is, there's not a lot of companies that have those in place.
Yeah.
Process-wise, also, it doesn't really come up very often.
Yeah. So what do you think would be a better situation for product leaders and product companies to take?
I think obviously there's a lot that can be done nowadays. Product people, I think, aspire to actually build really ethical products. It's just that there's not a lot of focus on it, and then it's easy to slip through your fingers. I think leadership, of course, is also quite involved sometimes in those topics, but I think in terms of the day-to-day decisions and implementations, it's a lot more, it's easier to spot opportunities to make your product more ethical in your day-to-day. So I think that product people actually should be the one that own the topic. And I know that we have a lot on our plate already, but it is such an important topic that we should definitely have it also as part of our job. And as anything, we don't have to work alone. We always work together with our teams. So designers, engineers, also researchers and so on, they should also be enlisted in those efforts to spot opportunities to make a product more ethical. And I think the education in the team should be indeed there so that people feel like they know how to approach it, that they feel empowered and so on. So I think this is something that would make already the situation a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think it feels like with AI coming in so rapidly into the world, that feels like a real minefield for ethics in product development.
Indeed, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the examples where I think product could be really involved to make sure that, for example, when it comes to biases or eliminating biases, making things more inclusive, this is one area in your product that you could already improve today. For example, other areas that could potentially be impacted quite often by practices that might not be as ethical. Could be anything to do with monetization and just being intransparent how you monetize your product, for example. Anything to do with data and privacy, and just having a really complicated process around it. Anything to do with how meaningful your product is for society, because we all know of products that are, a lot of people want to use them and they use them on a daily basis, but might not necessarily add to society in a positive way.
Yeah.
Any product that could be, for example, a little bit addictive. I think we
Yeah,
know
of
of some
course.
products.
Yep, of course. And I think there's definitely a big scenario in some of the more well-known products where they've definitely left their ethics and the morals at the door in the quest for monetization. And certainly some of the big tech companies you talk about, addiction and social media, that I guess becomes a real problem internally. And I guess there is a conflict of, do we be more ethical and reduce the amount of money that we're making? And that's obviously a real problem.
Indeed, that's one of the elephants in the room, of course. Product people have a lot of pressure to deliver something that's profitable. There's a lot of pressure on building things and just shipping them. And I think when it comes to doing these things, when it comes to moving the needle for a metric, if you know that there is, for example, a sort of like gray area solution that would definitely increase that metric that you're trying to influence, I think a lot of the times there is this pressure to deliver, and then people might decide to actually do something that's a bit gray area. It's not so bad. And then I just want to say, just don't do that. I
Yeah,
think we often say that product people have the superpower of being able to say no. And I think one way to make sure that your product is more ethical is just to start saying no to anything that could be considered maybe not so ethical, or maybe that is not just great scale. Sort of anything where you get pressure to deliver a certain metric, but it compromises your values as well. I think that would be something where product people could uniquely contribute to making sure that things are more ethical.
yeah. And how do you think you could effectively bake those behaviors into product management? Because I guess that's where the difficulty comes, is making sure that everybody understands what that looks like.
Indeed, I think when it comes to, as you said, baking it in the product management process, we all know that processes in companies are very different. So some companies use, for example, gated processes or more continuous delivery and so on. So it really feels like each company needs to find a unique way to make sure that they are addressing the problem in their own organization. So it could be that one of the gates that they're using is just looking at the ethical aspect of the product, or it could be that they continuously, as they deliver, they evaluate those practices as well against certain criteria. I would say that for me, something that has been working effectively is when you have the values in the team that they're shared, and that each team member knows what they're expected of them when it comes to ethics. And once you have that in place, the day to day becomes a lot more, I think, ethical in that sense.
Yeah.
But also something that is on a continuous basis, that where people meet regularly and just say, okay, let's look at our product, and just regularly evaluate what we've shipped, what we're working on, and so on. I think this would also provide opportunities to make some improvements.
Yeah, and I guess there's always some gaps and some conflict that's going to take place in these scenarios. So, how could you navigate any conflict that's in there?
Yeah, I think as with anything, when it comes to conflict, it's really important that you use your creativity and your negotiation skills. And the good thing is that a lot of product people are already skilled in those. So I think that would really help them already. But it's really about figuring out what are the different ways you can go about. And maybe if, try and think if you can come up together with your team, for example, a different approach, something that's potentially more ethical. Because I think when you try and apply more creativity, more negotiations in those conflicts, then I think potentially you find a different solution.
Yeah, cool. And I think one of the things that probably makes sense in this scenario is you do need a little bit of a top-down. It definitely needs to come from the top to then be able to spread throughout different teams. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about individual contributors, but I also want to talk a little bit about how product leaders affect the ethics of a product.
Yeah,
Because when it comes to defining success for a product, you could go about and just assign one metric to it and say, this is how we agree that this product is going to be successful. But this is a little bit one-dimensional, and it could lead potentially to the problem that when product people try to influence that one metric, they end up, making some trade-offs and potentially the ethics being on the losing side.
yeah,
So I think product leaders really need to appreciate and try and foster this sort of ethical product management approach, this
yeah.
mindset in their product people, and they should really praise such efforts, because I think only then, I think more ethical products will be released. And I think this is really part of the product leader jobs as well.
I think we've seen some questionable conflicts between metrics and ethics in some of the perhaps bigger tech businesses out there, where they definitely take revenue and profit over what might be the ethical thing to do.
Yeah, indeed. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, with profits, you really need to think long term, because, of course, it will be something that will be impacted. The more unethical things you do, the more team morale is going to go down. You could get user churn, customer churn, brand damage, and so on. So I think it's really not worth it in the long term.
Really cool. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Lily. It's been really interesting discussing through ethics and some of the conflicts in there. What would you say are the three key takeaways that people should take away from this discussion today?
It is a pretty big topic, but if I have to, just give you three things, I would say product people are uniquely positioned to influence how ethical a product is.
Yeah,
And of course, a lot of products out there right now are already having some shortcomings. So you could go right now and maybe do some improvements on your product. Also, I would say when it comes to figuring out, how to deal with the pressure to influence a certain metric and so on, creativity and negotiation skills are your friend. This is how you're going to go about it.
fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure people will find this super interesting, and hopefully it sparks a little bit more debate in more product teams so that they put ethics at the front of everything that they're doing. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you as well.